Go ahead.
Illinois gun ban cases and the U.S. Supreme Court, English proficiency and consumer and commercial driver's licenses, and Don Tracy eyeing the U.S. Senate. That's some of what we're going to be talking about on this Friday. Good morning. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop with you each and every weekday morning for the Center Square. Go to thecentersquare.com where you can sign up for the headlines to get into your inbox. All you got to do is click on newsletter. And you'll be able to see the latest from our team at the Illinois page for the Center Square. So go check out those headlines, but don't forget you can also get national headlines as well. So dip into those and get the latest at thecentersquare.com. Obviously, this morning, we've got several things we're going to tackle, including the latest in not just the Barnett case against Illinois' gun and magazine ban, but you've also got the Veramontes case, which is already out of the appeals court. When I was off on break last week, the U.S. Supreme Court decided to go ahead and send that case to conference. So we'll tackle that just a little bit. Also, we're going to talk live with State Representative Adam Niemerg. He filed legislation to essentially do away with Illinois giving non-citizens driver's licenses. And this following a fatal crash that happened involving a non-citizen crashing into some Southern Illinois individuals, one being a county official and his wife. They died. Niemerg's wanting to address that with legislation. But we also have numbers from Illinois State Police on the totals so far of the enforcement of English language proficiency, as you've got commercial drivers and CDL holders on Illinois roadways. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Plus, a feature profile of Don Tracy. He's a Republican running for Illinois U.S. Senate, but he's got at least, maybe 6 other candidates that he's going to potentially have to go up against in the March primary. So we'll share with you a conversation I had with him earlier this week. All right, so that's what we've got coming up here with Illinois in Focus Daily. Join us live where you can hop into the chat room. It's an interesting bunch of people who are always plugged in to the show, and they go back and forth on these issues and more. So obviously you can join that live with us as we go live at 8 o'clock Central here with Illinois in Focus Daily with the Center Square on YouTube. But if you can't catch the show live, you can always watch the replay or check out the segments, and also get the podcast where you get podcasts. Just search Illinois in Focus and you can make that happen. All right, so stay tuned. We'll talk about the gun ban challenges from Illinois and the U.S. Supreme Court. What's going to happen? Where are things at? We'll talk about it next with Illinois in Focus Daily. Case Veramontes versus Cook County is at the U.S. Supreme Court and has been put to conference for December 5th. this is just one of another case that could move forward to the U.S. Supreme Court soon, and that's the case Barnett v. Raoul, challenging Illinois' gun and magazine ban. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop with you each and every weekday morning, and we've been tracking the litigation against Illinois' gun and magazine ban since before it went into place, and even before that, there were bans regionally, like in Cook County. There was a ban on semi-automatic rifles and magazines over certain capacities, and an individual took that to court and went through the district courts, and then you have the state implementing its gun and magazine ban statewide. Veramontes included that in their challenge, goes to the appeals court. The appeals court sides with the state and the county, and now they've appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, and this is a separate case from the Southern District case, Barnett et al., which had 4 different plaintiffs groups and had a 4-day bench trial on the merits of the law, and a district court saying that the law was unconstitutional. The Barnett case, again separate from the Veramontes case, is still in the 7th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals with a hearing that happened on September 22nd, and here we are. Close to now 2 months fully after that hearing, and when are we going to get a ruling out of the 7th Circuit so we can anticipate fully whoever is the victor in that case, in the Barnett case, it's going to go to the U.S. Supreme Court. But before that, now we've got the U.S. Supreme Court's apparently going to consider the Veramontes case, and again, you can see the court docket at the U.S. Supreme Court's website. If you just search Veramontes v. Cook County, you will see that it was petitioned for writ on August 27th, shortly after the appeals court sided with the state in that case. You've also got, let me pull up here really quick, the actual ruling from the Veramontes case. You can see here the U.S. Supreme Court for the 7th Circuit saying that they brought this case with the Firearms Policy Coalition, Second Amendment Foundation, appealing the dismissal of their constitutional challenge to Cook County's assault weapons ban, relying on District of Columbia v. Heller and NYSERPA v. Bruin. They argue that the ordinance is facially invalid under the Second Amendment. Now, the appeals court, and this was back on June 2nd, when they made this ruling, they say that they addressed a similar challenge to the ordinance in a case that was before us on appeal with the denial of a preliminary injunction, and that was the Beavis case. By the way, the Beavis case, another regional gun ban challenge that also wrapped in the state gun ban, that stuck back at the district court after, on preliminary grounds, initial motions to halt the law as they deal with the merits. That made it all the way up and down to the judiciary, even going to the U.S. Supreme Court for consideration on preliminary grounds. But the Beavis case, again, separate from Veramontes, separate from Barnett, the Beavis case is stuck in the district court last I saw, and they're actually waiting for the outcome of other cases, including the Barnett case still in the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, and the Veramontes case now possibly in front of the U.S. Supreme Court as they have pushed that to conference. But the appeals court goes on to say that they reject the challenge based on the record the plaintiffs have compiled at that early stage of litigation. The challengers have failed to develop a record sufficient to justify a different result. We therefore affirm Cook County's ordinance prohibits the possession, acquisition, and transfer of assault weapons. The law applies to a variety of firearms, including semi-automatic rifles capable of accepting large capacity magazines and possessing certain features. So it goes on to explain more. This is not a first encounter with Cook County's ban. And Beavis, they said that the consolidated appeals in cases challenging Illinois state and local weapons bans, and Bruin, including Cook County ordinances at issue, we held the plaintiffs have failed to show at the preliminary injunction stage that the covered firearms materially differ from machine guns and military-grade weaponry. Again, this is some of the same stuff we saw from different appeals court cases, but this is what the Veramontes case is, right? It's the one that's now in front of the U.S. Supreme Court with the ongoing docket here showing that it's been distributed to conference for December 5th. What was the reply, right? Let's go ahead and check out the actual motion and the petition here for cert. All right, so this is from the plaintiffs in this case, and they spell out, the question presented, whether the Second and 14th Amendments guarantee the right to possess AR-15 platform and similar automatic rifles. The parties, and spells it out who they are, the disclosure statements, and other proceeding matters. Then you get to the table of contents. Always interesting to just kind of quickly glance at what the arguments are. And they spell out constitutional and statutory provisions. And they say that Cook County's weapons ban extends to the most popular rifle in America. The ban's effects on petitioners explained, and goes on for reasons for granting the petition. So they're asking the U.S. Supreme Court, lower courts need guidance in applying Heller and Bruin. The issues presented in the case critically important. The decisions below blesses a ban on the most popular rifle in America. Under the rationale of the decision below, the Second Amendment permits anything short of a complete ban on all firearms, and the decision below irreconcilably conflicts with Heller and Bruin. They say Heller requires finding that the banned rifles are arms within the meaning of the Second Amendment's plain text, and history demonstrates that only arms that are both dangerous and unusual may be banned. And they say that this case is a good vehicle to address this question. Now, this is where we're going to get into a little bit of interesting back and forth, because you've got the Viramontes case, which did not have a bench trial, right? There's a lot of evidence and documentation, but it didn't have that bench trial building a even more substantial record. That was done in the Barnett case, and the Barnett case is still in the Seventh Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals. And the Barnett case that consolidated 4 different plaintiffs groups in the Southern District on preliminary grounds, it as well went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, where the U.S. Supreme Court said they're not going to take the case because it wasn't ripe yet. It then went all the way back to the district court. Last year they had a trial, and then you had the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals take up the district court's order that the ban was unconstitutional. So again, District Judge Stephen McGlynn in East St. Louis holding that 4-day bench trial, deciding that the law is unconstitutional. So now it's in the appeals court. The appeals courts held it for a bit. The plaintiffs had to say, hey, we're in limbo here. We have a judge order saying it's unconstitutional, but you guys are sitting on whether or not you are going to take the case and move forward with it. The appeals court then said, yes, they're going to have a hearing. They held the hearing, and then ultimately that's where we're at in the appeals court on the merits of the Barnett case. And it has a record that observers are acknowledging is a very strong record that they believe is exactly what the U.S. Supreme Court is looking for. So now we've got that still lingering in the Seventh Circuit. The Viramontes case may not have as strong of a record. That's what's being put forward to the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, I'm sure the U.S. Supreme Court, as they've done with other gun ban cases, they say, oh, we're not taking this one yet. We're not taking that one yet. Will they do that to the Viramontes case and say, hey, there's another case that's getting ready to get to us, the Barnett case, with a strong record addressing this question that the Seventh Circuit keeps bringing up about militaristic style firearms? They're too similar to military firearms. And if you recall that Barnett case, the 4-day bench trial, they had experts on both sides of the argument talking about the key differences between military firearms, not just from, having fully auto and burst and semi-auto, but also the metallurgy of the firearm is different from military grade versus the civilian metallurgy for consumer rifles that only do semi-automatic. But obviously a lot's been focused on the AR-15. Illinois' gun and magazine ban goes much further than the AR-15. It goes on to ban more than 170 different firearms beyond that too, when it comes to attachments and various different types of semi-automatic platforms, so including semi-automatic shotguns and a variety of other firearms. So what's going to happen here? It'll be interesting to sit back and watch. And of course, December 5th is the conference for the U.S. Supreme Court, and we'll find out if they put that in the orders list to go ahead and take up the case or to deny taking up that case in a way to ultimately go about waiting for the Barnett case. So we'll be watching, of course, here with Illinois in Focus Daily, and get to thecentersquare.com. Sign up for the newsletter and wake up with us with those headlines in your inbox each and every day. And weekdays, be with us here for Illinois in Focus Daily. 25,000 enforcement efforts from Illinois State Police for commercial driver's license holders on Illinois roadways. 221 failed English language proficiency exams. And that's led to an interesting conversation about enforcement of that new federal standard. But you've also got questions about non-citizens getting driver's licenses in Illinois and the harms that that has led to. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. You can wake up with us each and every weekday morning, live with you for the Center Square. Go to thecentersquare.com, sign up for the newsletter today, and get this podcast wherever you get podcasts. Just search Illinois in Focus. All right, so let's get to first our live guest joining us, State Representative Adam Niemerg. He is, downstate representative, Republican. He has recently filed legislation really trying to address a tragic crash, a fatal crash that happened in your area, Representative. Thanks for taking time with us this morning. Go ahead and tell us what exactly your legislation would do and how you feel that the state's policies have led to this tragedy.
Well, first off, thanks for having me on this morning, Greg. I really appreciate coming on your program. And yes, Clayton's Law is a wonderful bill that we need to enact immediately. Mike and Gail Clayton. Mike was a Coles County board member and fatally injured, he and Gail, in my district by a drunken illegal immigrant, also on drugs. These deaths cannot happen. And now we have a situation where CDLs will be given to illegal immigrants. We have driver's license to illegal immigrants. And this isn't the first time where a death has been caused by a drunken illegal immigrant or an illegal immigrant in general in the state of Illinois. We see this happening continually throughout the state of Illinois, and it's because of the bad policies enacted by Governor J.B. Pritzker and Mayor Brandon Johnson in the city of Chicago, the sanctuary state, sanctuary city policy. And furthermore, after this terrible loss of life, Mike and Gail Clayton, the Democrats, back in Springfield the following week, doubled down on their radical agenda for the illegal immigration issue, which we've spent $3.4 billion of your taxpayer dollars to propagate up. So this bill requires that you have to speak English. It should be a common sense initiative. Speak English to be able to operate a motor vehicle here in the state of Illinois, and you must be a United States citizen.
So the current law, as I understand it, I mean, recently they changed the standard driver's license and the what was the name for it beforehand? The temporary visitors driver's license, the TVDL, I believe it was, and that said, not federal ID. But then they changed the standards to just wrap both of those in, and ultimately now there's really no indication if somebody has a standard driver's license whether or not they are a temporary visitor or if they're a permanent resident, right?
That's absolutely correct. They have the same driver's license as every other individual in the state of Illinois. And furthermore, law enforcement does not have the authority to cooperate with ICE when it comes to these detainment hearings or cooperate with ICE in any way, shape, or form under state statute. So we really have a situation where when law enforcement pulls over an illegal immigrant, that illegal immigrant cannot speak English. Law enforcement cannot detain that individual. Law enforcement cannot ask the immigration status of that individual. And we have criminals running rampant throughout the state of Illinois, just running free based on these illegal immigrant ridiculous policies.
We're talking with State Representative Adam Niemerg live with the Center Square's Illinois in Focus, and the issue is non-citizens getting driver's licenses, and you're looking to essentially reverse Illinois policies to require English proficiency, even just for private individuals driving. Representative, your response to those who would say it's racist to require somebody to know English proficiently in order to drive on Illinois roadways?
Well, that's just a deflection from the truth. And the Democrats continually use that language, racist, and it's the furthest from the truth. It's about having safety and security on our streets. It's about putting our citizens first. It's about making sure that the folks that are driving on the roads can read the signs. I don't see anything racist about that in any way, shape, or form. For an individual to be able to read a sign, to be able to drive here in the state of Illinois, furthermore, to be able to have a motor vehicle driver's license, to be a United States citizen. There's nothing absolutely wrong with that in any way, shape, or form. So the Democrats to deflect and gaslight on this particular issue is really, that just means they don't have a leg to stand on when it comes to this argument, because that's what happens if the Democrats just have nothing to say about it. They just call us, sexist, racist, bigots, whatever term they want want to use to deflect from the actual facts that we have illegal immigration causing a major issue in the state of Illinois. We have folks like Mike and Gail Clayton that have lost their lives as a result of the illegal immigrant policies perpetuated by the radical left, J.B. Pritzker, and the House and Senate Democrats. And we must put a stop to this. We cannot allow non-citizens to drive on our roads. We can't allow folks who cannot even speak English to drive on our roads. And we must cooperate with federal law enforcement agencies. This is another issue. We see what's happening in Chicago. These things would not be happening if Mayor Johnson and Governor Pritzker actually allowed our state and local law enforcement agencies to cooperate with ICE.
Representative, I reached out to Illinois State Police to ask if I could do a ride-along with their CDL enforcement officers in the Springfield area. I figured Springfield's a nice area. You got 72 and 55. It's a major hub for the intersection of America. So I figured that would be a good spot to see just how often they do English language proficiency exams and how often they might, hit somebody who doesn't have the proficiency for the English language. They denied my request for a ride-along, so I want to get your response to that. And if you would do a ride-along, and I don't know if bring a camera with you or something, but they did provide numbers though. They said that, and I'm going to pull this up from the Illinois State Police. They say, following guidance issued by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, every ISP officer conducting a commercial motor vehicle inspection initiates the inspection in English. If there is an indication the driver may not understand the inspector's instructions, the inspector then conducts an English language proficiency assessment. Since June 25th, 2025, when the guidance was incorporated into the North American Standard out of service criteria, ISP has completed approximately 25,600 inspections, of which 221 citations were issued. So they give a breakdown of the total ELP violations from 2023. It's 385. 2024, 565. That's after 78,000 plus total inspections. Now, again, they're saying that so far this year, you've got 221 since June, but total year to date's 546. It looks like there's definitely an increase in the number of CDL holders that are failing English language proficiency in the state of Illinois, and they do point that about 10 to 15%, even up to 18% so far year to date, are CDLs that are from the state of Illinois. The rest, vast majority, 80+%, are from out-of-state CDL holders. Your response to all of this, especially in the light of what happens to the Claytons and what we've seen in other parts of the country when it comes to CDL drivers, ultimately leading to fatal crashes.
Well, first off, the entire country, we need to take initiatives. Other states need to take initiatives on this, and the federal government as well. Donald Trump's doing an excellent job on the immigration issue, but there needs to be an initiative done completely and federally on this further. I know Representative Mary Miller is taking the initiative on that as well, because you said 80% are non-state, 20% are in-state. So we need to solve the problem in the state of Illinois. The federal government and other states need to solve the problem within their states. But it really does scare me a little bit. It also makes me wonder what questions are being asked. How are these questions being asked? What is the grading scale of proficiency? What does that exactly mean? And also very scary that they're willing just to supply you that information and that actually allow you as a journalist to go on a ride-along to figure out what's happening here in the state of Illinois, because the ISP works directly for Governor J.B. Pritzker. Maybe there's something to hide there that they don't want you to see. So it would, I'd like to see them allow you to go on that ride-along to get that information and get some factual information to what's actually going on. And furthermore, having a driver's license in the state of Illinois, we must be able to have citizens have driver's license. But when it comes to CDLs, you're talking about a loaded semi traveling down the road at 65, 70, 75 mile an hour. I was driving to Champaign the last few days, and semis passing me at 75 miles an hour. And I'm wondering about my own safety and my children's safety in the vehicle as well. Is this individual passing me an illegal immigrant that doesn't understand English that could cause an accident, a fatal accident? So when it comes to the deaths that we're looking at, the fatalities of Mike and Gail Clayton because of a drunken, drugged up illegal, quite frankly. And then we look at Katie Abraham and Champaign, and we look at other folks throughout the state of Illinois. We need to take action on this. And it really boils down to this is a massive Democrat voter registration drive, because the Democrats need the illegal immigrants in the state of Illinois for their census numbers when they come to redistricting, because if they don't have those figures, Republicans will pick up seats. So this has nothing to do with humanitarian aid. This has nothing to do with being pro-immigrant. This has everything to do with the Democrats keeping and controlling power. Because if folks could come into this country legally, they could prosper, they could pay into the tax system, they wouldn't be looking over their shoulder. Now you have a situation where folks are a permanent underclass. They're always looking over their shoulder. They're getting paid living wages to be here in the state of Illinois, all because the Democrats want to use them for their own political agenda.
Representative Adam Niemer, greatly appreciate you taking the time with us today and reacting to this. I'll ask again about getting a ride-along with Illinois State Police and some sourcing that I have just to address some of your questions. When they approach somebody as a CDL driver and it's obvious they don't understand the English language, that kicks in the ELP, and I believe there are like a series of 8 questions that they have to ask, and if they fail to answer those questions, then they ultimately have to just put the truck up and continue more safety inspection and not let it proceed. But I would like to see that as a journalist firsthand, and their statement saying they can't accompany that request was I have yet to get like an official breakdown, but just in some background conversation, there's concerns about you're not really going to see much. You're not going to be able to go to the cab and hear the questions and whatnot. You'll have to stay in the car. And my response was, well, that's fine. I'll still be able to get an understanding of just how often this is happening every day for this officer that's doing this enforcement. And then they said, well, you'll be in the car and it could be not safe. We've had multiple vehicles sideswiped, right? And my response was, I signed the waiver on the application for the ride-along. So they have the application in hand, but still have yet to get that to happen. Is that something you would want to do? Do a ride-along?
Let's do it together, Greg. Let's send in some information. Let's make that request and let's do it together. And I do have a question. This is a federal requirement, or is this a state requirement for these questions to be asked?
I believe it's federal. So according to according to the ISP statement, it's the North American standards that were implemented by the DOT, the federal DOT, over the summer. So that's the number, the 221s, just from that June number, right? Just from June, but total over the year they have 500 plus. So it'll be interesting to see just how much of an increase that is. And I did get a statement back from the Midwest Truckers Association, and they said the bottom line here is once the feds actually put this out there and said you have to enforce it, then states are finally starting to enforce it, states like Illinois. So we'll just see how high those numbers get by the end of the year.
Yes, and it's also, I'm glad the federal government's doing that, but folks, it goes to show that the state of Illinois, the Illinois Democrats have zero issue with illegal immigrants and folks that cannot speak English driving on our roads in giant semis.
Representative Adam Niemer, greatly appreciate you taking time with us live here for Illinois in Focus, and we'll definitely talk about this and other issues in the future, all right? Be safe out there, and happy Thanksgiving to you and yours, all right?
Happy Thanksgiving and Merry Christmas.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll talk before Christmas, but thumbs up. All right, appreciate you. It is Illinois in Focus daily, each and every weekday morning here for the Center Square. I'm Greg Bishop, and get this and more at thecentersquare.com.
This Senate race is a really important race. We're a one-party state right now, and that means one party has all the power. There's no saying that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Democrats have absolute power in this state, And that may be why, over the last 40 years, about 2,000 Democrat Chicago politicians have been convicted and sent to prison, including the Speaker of the House and powerful aldermen and a recent governor. If we want to make this a better state, we need to make it a two-party state. And let's start that by electing a Republican for this open U.S. Senate seat.
That is Republican U.S. Senate candidate Don Tracy. Some of the conversation I had with him earlier this week at the Illinois State House. But he's got to get through a pretty crowded primary. And 22 individuals signing up to run for U.S. Senator Dick Durbin's open Senate seat. He's retiring. 14 Democrats, 8 Republicans. I believe 1 Republican has been withdrawn from that. So now there's 7 Republicans, Don Tracy being one of those. And I chatted with him about a variety of things. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. Wake up with us each and every weekday morning. Join the live chats where you can sound off on these issues and more. But obviously, we've got an election year where the March primary is just around the corner. You've got petitions that have been filed for Democrats and Republicans vying for offices across the state, including the statewide offices. Governor, Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General, Secretary of State, Comptroller, Treasurer, and also U.S. Senate. And don't forget about all of the different state house races that there are, right? I know a lot of people look at Congress, and obviously you've got Illinois congressmen, 17 of them. Most are Democrats, and that's going to be on the ballot as well. But don't forget about those state house races, right? Every 2 years, Illinois state house representatives, they are up for re-election, and it's staggered for Illinois Senate seats across the state. So a lot to tackle, and especially understanding who's on the ballot and whatnot. So we'll get the March primary, but then obviously that gets us to the November midterm general election, and lots at stake. So one race, obviously, in November is that U.S. Senate seat, and U.S. Senator Dick Durbin, who's been in Congress since like 1980 or something. He was a U.S. representative, and then he became a U.S. senator, but he's retiring, so not seeking another term. That's opened up that seat, and you've got Republicans and Democrats looking to get their party's nomination to go on to battle it out in the November general election. And I imagine we're also going to see some non-established party candidates, like a Libertarian candidate, or maybe a Green Party candidate, or maybe a Democratic Socialist candidate. Not sure how we're going to see this come together before the November election, but we've got the Republican and Democrat, the established party primary coming up March 17th. So let's get to some of the conversation I had with Don Tracy. He was a former Illinois Republican chairman. So he was the chairman of the Illinois Republican Party for several years. And he's run for office in the past as a lieutenant governor candidate. But he took time to really react to where we're at in the space of the, aftermath of the federal government shutdown that's now ended, and the impacts of that. And he says that Democrats abused the filibuster.
This was an abuse of the filibuster, and I'm a strong supporter of the filibuster, because without the filibuster, you have yo-yo government every time the power changes in Washington, D.C. But the filibuster should not be used by a minority party to try to get their way that they can't get by voting or by negotiation and holding the hostage government and costing the economy and stranding travelers and cutting off food stamps and all the other damage that the shutdown did. This was a Democrat filibuster abuse. And I don't think Republicans should do it either. And we have done it in the past, and I was opposed to it then. So hopefully this will never happen again.
Well, it's interesting because we've got another deadline coming up in late January, I believe, where you could have a similar thing play out with a potential shutdown of the federal government. But Tracy said that if he was in the U.S. Senate during that time, he would have voted to keep the government open.
Well, I would certainly have voted to override the Democrat filibuster. But we need 60 votes, of course, to do that. I'm just thankful that there were 8 Democrats that crossed the aisle to finally end it, including Senator Durbin. Senator Durbin's been taking a lot of flack from his party for that reason, because, the Democrat Party is being taken over by the socialists now. They call themselves Democrat socialists, but they really are socialists. And they are very upset that the shutdown ended. because, for socialists to take over, which they really want to do in this country, you have to first disrupt existing order. So that's why they didn't care about the damage being done to working families and the economy and the country, because their long-term goal is to convert to a socialistic society. Fortunately, Senator Durbin, say what you will about him as a Republican, he is not a socialist, and I think that's one of the reasons why he crossed the aisle to eliminate the filibuster shutdown.
So you've got Don Tracy looking at taking Durbin's seat as a Republican, but still on the shutdown. He recently pointed out that one of the 14 Democrats candidates for that Senate seat, U.S. Representative Robin Kelly, went on ABC and said that the shutdown was worth it. He says, no, it was not worth it. It was a bad idea, and it really hurts the economy.
Well, critically important because this shutdown shows the damage that you can do to the economy and to the country, and all for naught. The Democrats got nothing out of it. They tried to abuse the filibuster to get something that they can't get by voting or by negotiation, and that is wrong. And hopefully, this will never happen again.
So you've got the question of whether or not the Democrats, got anything out of this. The Democrats, from reports, were looking to address Obamacare tax credits and subsidies, extending those. And even Robin Kelly said that they have a bill, the Democrats do, to extend tax credits for 3 years for Obamacare. So others were saying that the Democrats were trying to get the benefits to be more relaxed, so you don't have like work requirements for SNAP or work requirements for Medicaid and things along those lines, and the Affordable Care Act addressing those. But also people were alleging Democrats want to have illegal aliens get access to health coverage, health care subsidies. Illinois does do that. We have the health benefits for immigrant seniors that's still in place with a budget of $160 million, I believe was what was put in the governor's budget. It's currently in place. But you had the health benefits for immigrant adults that was in place for several years. Cost overruns, hundreds of millions of dollars of tax subsidies going to that. The governor did end that, the benefits program for adults, but the seniors program is still in place. But regardless, the allegations from Republicans in Congress was that Democrats were trying to hold out to get health benefits for non-citizens in the country, and they didn't get any of that. So now we're facing the debate about health care, and Don Tracy, Republican running for the Illinois Senate, says, or the U.S. Senate from Illinois, he says that healthcare needs to be addressed, and it needs to be done with both parties at the table.
Well, it needs dramatic reform. It's the ACA, Affordable Care Act, is really the Unaffordable Care Act. It has driven up premium prices. It's driven up the cost of health care. It has enriched some of the people in there, including certain insurance companies, because of its 15% profit provision. We need a reform that focuses on price transparency, on a competitive marketplace for health insurance, which we don't have right now, and consumer choice. And that reform needs to be bipartisan. The Democrats shoved Obamacare down Republicans' throats because they had 60 votes at that time, so we couldn't stop it with the filibuster. And we've seen what problems we've had because it's been a disaster. So I think we should learn from that lesson that health care reform has to be bipartisan, and it's too important not to reform. It's approaching 20% of GNP. That is unsustainable. That if that trend continues, it will bankrupt this country and working families. We've got to reform it, but it needs to be bipartisan.
And he also talked about benefit eligibility for things like SNAP, for things like Medicaid, and other taxpayer-funded subsidies. How important is it that, for instance, the state of Illinois gets that right? Talked yesterday about SNAP benefits and the error rate, and how the Department of Human Services in Illinois talking about how it's difficult to put the rules together that the Trump administration's imposing and trying to see how it impacts things like non-citizens getting food benefits. And even the Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul yesterday putting out a letter joining other attorneys general from Democrats states that say that they are opposing this rule that would take away food benefits for non-citizens in the country. Here's Tracy talking about eligibility requirements for these types of subsidies.
Well, Democrats believe in the honor system, it seems like, for voting and for government benefit eligibility. At one point in time, and I think they still do it, on Medicaid eligibility, for example, they'll send a letter to a participant and say, according to our records, you are eligible for Medicaid. If this is incorrect, please advise. No, who's going to say I'm not eligible for a government benefit? It's just crazy. We need real eligibility, and that's part of what the fight in Washington is all about. Because in the big beautiful bill, otherwise known as the Working Families Tax Cut Bill, there were some provisions in there to verify Medicaid and food stamp eligibility, and the Democrats were fighting that left and right. Because they don't care. A lot of them are socialists, and they just want government benefits for everybody, regardless of eligibility.
Tracy, again, running for U.S. Senate as a Republican. But we've got the March primary coming up. As I said, 22 individuals have filed for both the Democrat and Republican primaries. Tracy facing, at one point, 7, but I think now he's facing 6 Republicans. And he says it's important because Republicans need to get a statewide seat in the state of Illinois.
Well, especially, with the power shifting in D.C., as we've seen it shift recently from Democrat to Republican, it seems to me that a state would be better off with one Republican senator and one Democrat senator. And right now there are 8 statewide offices in Illinois, 6 stateside and then the 2 Senate seats. And the Democrats have all of them. And in fact, 7 of the 8 are based in Chicago or Cook County. The 3 leading contenders on the other side of this seat nomination are all Chicago, Cook County Democrats. Durbin is the only downstater. And if I don't win this seat, then all 8 will be from Chicago or Cook County. We need to make this a 2-party state again, and the way to start that is by electing an Illinois Republican for this open U.S. Senate seat, and that would be me.
He talks about how it's a really important race to fill Durbin's seat.
This Senate race is a really important race. We're a one-party state right now, and that means one party has all the power. There's no saying that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Democrats have absolute power in this state, and that may be why over the last 40 years, about 2,000 Democrat Chicago politicians have been convicted and sent to prison, including the Speaker of the House and powerful aldermen and a recent governor. If we want to make this a better state, we need to make it a 2-party state, and let's start that by electing a Republican for this open U.S. Senate seat.
But Republicans going to have a crowded primary. There are at one point 8 Republicans on the ballot. Checked this morning, and one of them has withdrawn, I believe. But the petition objection process still ongoing, and we'll see just exactly who survives that and who doesn't, or who just plainly withdraws their name from consideration for whatever reason. So the ballot's not set for the March primary quite yet, and I imagine there could be some court challenges to some nominating petitions that could draw things out. So the ballot's not yet secured and solidified, but it is going to be a full primary.
There were 22 candidates. There were 14 on the Democrat side, and there were 8 on the Republican side. And I like the way the Chicago Tribune reported it. They said on the Republican side that Don Tracy and 7 other Republicans filed for the seat. The Daily Herald said the same thing, plus they threw in my picture.
Now, does that mean that Tracy is confident? He's got the name recognition, right? I mean, you have on media saying that, on the Republican side, Don Tracy faces 7 other opponents. Not naming those opponents. Obviously, it's a primary. There's going to be a lot of action on the ballot. We'll see how voter turnout is. But, Tracy, I asked him, are you confident with that name recognition? You're going to come out of this on top?
I'm not that confident, but I think it was a good start. Things can change in politics. The primary is March 17th, And right now it looks good for us, but things can change. So we're taking nothing for granted, and we're campaigning hard to win the March primary.
So that's Don Tracy, Republican candidate for U.S. Senate. We'll see if we can chat with some of the other candidates that are out there. We're also lining up interviews with gubernatorial candidates, talking with Ted Dabrowski, Joe Severino. You've got Darren Bailey and also Jim Mendrick, and a couple of others are on that list for potential Republican nominees. Again, March is just around the corner. Believe it or not, it's going to be here before you know it. So we'll have a lot more to talk about this and so much more. Right here with Illinois in Focus daily, each and every weekday morning. Get the podcast where you get podcasts. Wake up with us. With headlines in your inbox, go to thecentersquare.com. All right, that's all I got for you today. Greatly appreciate you guys taking time with us each and every weekday morning. It's great to see the vibrant discussions happening in the live chats where people are definitely on top of it and plugged in. So you can join that as well each and every weekday morning. But if you can't make the live show, watch it after the fact, watch the segments, or you can just listen to it on podcast. So have yourselves a wonderful weekend. Reminder, you've got Illinois in Focus Weekend Edition, where Jim Talamonte and I from the Center Square discuss some of the headlines that you may have missed. So be sure to catch that this weekend on radio stations across Illinois. You can also get it right here on YouTube, Illinois in Focus. All right, get the podcast where you get podcasts and check out thecentersquare.com. Have a great weekend.